Everybody, this is the little presentation oh, thank you for telling me. So this is the little presentation I put together to try to kind of demonstrate, that was not what I meant to do, to kind of talk about what ARES actually is and what we're trying to do here. Because not everybody, people have heard the term, but they don't even really know what that really means. So I'm just going to kind of at a high level go over what ARES is, what its relationship is to RACES, because a lot of people kind of conflate those, and then kind of what the plans are that we have so far for what we're going to do here in DC.
Terrific.
So what is ARES? So this is quote unquote, it's a core of trained amateur radio operators. So you have to be a ham who assist with public service or emergency communications. So ARES itself is a part of ARRL and HacDC, if I recall correctly, we're affiliated with ARRL as well. So it's part of the field organization of ARRL, but you don't have to be a member of ARRL to be ARES. So basically ARRL helps kind of administer the program, but you don't have to be a member of ARRL to be an ARES, but you do have to be a ham with a license. It can't just be interested parties. So kind of the primary goal is to provide public service communications, right? Obviously we're kind of oriented towards, responding to emergencies, but we can also provide other public service communications, based on the skill sets that we're cultivating to be able to respond in an emergency. So like I said before, the only requirement is to be a licensed amateur. You don't have to be a member of ARRL. You don't actually have to be, a member of any specific club or national organization. You just have to be, an ARES volunteer you have to be a volunteer and be interested and be a licensed amateur. So how is ARES organized? So it's organized at the local level. So basically each group is based on a locality, city or county, or in the case of us, the district, right? We are the not state, the city and the county, right? So we represent ourselves. Each ARES groups come under sections. In general, sections kind of go along with a state, although some large states are kind of split up. And in the case of DC, we're in the Maryland DC section. So basically it's Maryland and us are in a section together. And then the section reports up to a division. Atlantic division is kind of mid-Atlantic-ish from here up through like Pennsylvania-ish. And then that's part of the national organization. So that gives you some idea. Kind of our closest peers are the folks in Maryland. So each ARES group is led by an emergency coordinator, and I'm the EC. And the EC is selected by the section manager. So section manager in Maryland, DC is Marty. There's also a section emergency coordinator who's picked by Marty. He has, that's Jim. They have kind of, their mission is to kind of handle the emergency coordinating all of the emergency coordinators in the section. Does this mean that ARRL tells us what to do? No, not really. So, the main way that they kind of provide guidance is that they select the emergency coordinator. In the case of DC, the position was open. So I asked and they were like, you seem fine. So that's why I'm the EC. So what do I do? So, they asked me to send them a monthly report that kind of tells them what we're doing. So they have some idea of how many volunteer hours are happening through the section, what kind of nets and exercises are happening. And they help facilitate some communication between the groups. So like when we have weather events and things going on, Marty or Jim will send out emails and that kind of thing. But that's really what they do. They're not trying to tell us how we should run our group. They're trying to help facilitate us and provide us guidance, provide us information. And in return, we kind of give them some information that they can filter up to the ARRL, to the national organization about what's happening down at the group level, the section level, as far as participation. What's the difference between ARES and RACES? So this comes up a lot. So RACES is defined by the FCC as any amateur who's been kind of certified or authorized to be to work for a civil defense organization. So that's kind of an old-timey word from the Cold War, but basically nowadays, civil defense means DHS, FEMA, state and local emergency management offices. So what that would mean for us is just because we're ARES doesn't mean we're RACES. ARES is part of ARL. It is they help us facilitate kind of training and organizing within our locality. If we were to be RACES, we would have to be kind of deputized or selected and certified by, in our case, it'd probably be DC Homeland Security Emergency Management Agency or something like that. If, if we were, when I was out in Fairfax, that was the, emergency management group there, right? That they would, pick who was going to be a RACES operator. So a lot of ARES groups kind of style themselves as being ARES RACES, and that's because they're kind of helping to facilitate the folks who go into the RACES program with their local civil defense organization. I have a little bit more about that. So basically what normally happens is you'll have an ARES group in a county, and they will kind of bring folks in, bring in volunteers, help train them, help them get them up to a minimum level of training. And they'll kind of, attest to the, emergency manager that these folks have such and such amount of training. They've committed these, completed these courses or that task book, whatever kind of the emergency manager thinks is the minimum amount of training he or she would like to see from the RACES volunteers. Additionally, usually they'll also want to do some kind of background check or some other kind of validation of the people that they're bringing in as RACES volunteers. So one of the keys is if there was a real emergency and they wanted to call upon folks who are RACES volunteers, you're not really ARES anymore, right? In a way, you are, but you aren't. You take off your ARES hat, as they say, and you now work for the emergency manager as a volunteer. If the big one hits. So, they would say, hey, so-and-so, you're on our call out list. We need help with communication support for, in the EOC or, communication out to some shelters or something like that. And so that's how you would become RACES. You would only be RACES while the emergency manager is calling on you to do so. When they're done with you, you go back to, being just an ARES volunteer, just an operator. So that was really, I guess I'll pause real quick because I was talking real fast. I know I talk fast. Any kind of questions about the role of ARES versus RACES and that stuff? Okay.
Is there a RACES in the district?
So as far as I know, there isn't. So the key is for us, if we wanted to be RACES, and we don't necessarily have to be, if we wanted to be RACES, we would probably help facilitate that by us as ARES going to the emergency manager, right, and saying, hey, we have this group of volunteer operators who are able to support you. Would you like them? And if they said yes, then we would say, all right, here's all the volunteers who meet whatever we agree is the minimum set of requirements. I will attest that they've completed such and such ICS courses or demonstrated such and such capabilities, so that the emergency manager would want to bring that person in as a volunteer. And then they would give you, normally they would have some kind of credentialing or something to make you a member or basically a volunteer for the emergency operations center or similar.
Okay.
So how can ARES help during an emergency? So besides just working for the emergency manager, we can also provide communications support for hospitals, the Red Cross, or other emergency shelters. There's also the National Traffic System. I know Marty would love for us to do NTS because that's his thing. And that's basically how, when you help provide kind of relay messages, from an affected area, away from the affected area. Another thing is Skywarn and severe weather nets are other ways that we can kind of help facilitate that. A lot of ARES groups try to ensure that their members are also Skywarn trained and participate in Skywarn severe weather nets. Patrick, do you have a question? You're on mute.
Yeah. The traffic system. I mean, I'm kind of familiar with that just from hearing people talk about it on repeaters and and nets, but has that evolved at all? Like, is there any, like, does it use digital modes now or anything like that?
I'm not that dialed into it because it's mostly HF and I don't really do a lot of HF. So I get the impression they're still kind of old school phone at this point. We could try to pull in some of those folks to kind of give us an explainer if we were interested in kind of, trying to get more hooked into that. I'm sure they would love to tell us about it.
I think they would love us to tell us about it. I'm just worried about. I want to know what happens. Some clue first.
They definitely do, and they have daily nets, so I can try to dig up what the information is. They have nets every single day for NTS. You could just listen and see what they're up to too, and see if you want to be involved in that.
There you go. Thanks.
So, all right. So what do we do when it's not an emergency? So for one thing, we practice, right? The only way that you're going to be able to effectively respond in an emergency is that if you have the muscle memory to be able to do what you need to do, right? To be able to communicate effectively, to work with your equipment, to get to the right places, to do the right things. So that's key. How do we do that? One of them is directed ARES nets. So the Monday night net is, fun and conversational, but it is not a directed net. Anybody who listens to the Montgomery County ARES or Prince George's ARES, you'll hear that a directed net is, a strict kind of call and response. And part of that is that it comes down to being able to organize traffic, right? Organize those communication streams and kind of manage all of the folks who are on that net. So one of the keys will be practicing, the procedures of those directed nets. Other things we can do are simulated emergency tests. Those can be tests just for ourselves, as the DC ARES, but we can also get hooked into other tests that are taking place either at the hospitals, the emergency managers, the CERT groups. There are lots of groups around here who are doing different simulated emergencies that we can get tied into and participate in and provide communication support or kind of, latch onto what they're doing. Training and continuing education. We'd really like to do lots of trainings and different activities to help people learn and help people be more effective, both technically and with their communication skills. And then the last thing, and I alluded to this earlier in the call, is that we have upcoming public service events. And a good thing about public service events is that you learn how to do that directed communication. You get practice with it. You learn what to say and not to say. Is a big thing also when you're on an open net. So a lot of those are, fun runs, the bike races we talked about, the marathon, Marine Corps Marathon will come up in October. Some other groups help with parades. In the past, folks in this group have participated with the Women's March and that kind of thing. We could have amplified our capabilities if we had been trained, if we were tied into the EOC, if we had all of this background, we were able to support them then, we would have been able to do an even better job, and we'll be able to do a better job even in the future with the skills that we're going to work on together and the procedures and the practices and the technology and everything else we're going to put together. So, so what are we going to do here? So that's up to us, basically. Like I said, it's locally directed and we can do what we think is best for us. We don't have wildfires here. We don't have hurricanes. And based on that, people may be like, well, you don't need emergency communication. Well, we have inaugurations. We have insurrections. We have, marches that, more than double the population of the city for a day, right? These are things that don't happen in other places that are unique to DC.
Might have a truck protest soon. The way things are going.
Don't bring that up. So we'll plan our net for that. So these are things that don't happen in other places, right? So we can tailor, our processes and procedures to reflect the kind of environment we're in, right? We don't have to have the same processes or do the same things they do in California or Florida or other places. We do what makes sense for us, and we have the ability to do that, right? So what's next? So I want to recruit you. So, so anybody who's on and anybody who, hopefully sees this recording, anybody can sign up, right? I know and we can get into later on more detail about the ICS and the blah, blah, blah. You don't need that to get started to participate, right? Anybody can help with the public service events, to get involved in the training and all the stuff we're going to do. Just all you got to do is have a license. What we want to work on, especially this year, is, building up skills about effective communication, how you, work in that, how you have succinct and effective message handling, net operations. We can start talking about some of the NIMS ICS stuff that scares everybody. It's just simple classes you take online. Some other stuff we can get into is like WinLink and data operation. Some other fun hands-on stuff will be like Go Kits, portable operation, batteries and making some stuff. And, even if it's just tiger tails and things, that amplifies your capabilities a lot with just a little bit of work, or, just, 5 cents worth of materials. Like I said before, we need to practice, start doing our ARES nets, eventually get into doing, emergency tests, and then public service events that we've already kind of signed up for. And the last thing is planning. And that really comes into, like I talked about before, doing repeater testing. That'll help us determine what coverage we have on the repeaters. That can help us come up with a band plan. That can help us determine, if an emergency happened, or if we, if for some reason we need to throw up a net very quickly, where do we do it? How do we operate simplex? Where can you operate simplex? Which operators can you operate and where? Those are all things that we have to do kind of some investigating first, and then we plan. And once we come up with plans, then we can go ahead and, test those plans and replicate them and develop on them. So this kind of goes back to what I was just saying. So we want to start with doing some net protocol training. And my thought was maybe we just do a Jitsi or a Zoom or something like that to start kind of explaining how that works, and kind of probably do that sooner than later. And then start having regular nets on K3 MRC, whether it's before or after the conversational net, or a different night, or, we take some nights from the Monday night nets and do them as ARES. I kind of like that we have the conversational net, so maybe separate, but something we can talk about. We talked about the repeater coverage testing that we'd really like to do kind of once it warms up a little bit. Get people out there trying the repeaters, testing the repeaters, figuring out what works, what doesn't. Another thing we need to talk about is, how you communicate during these events, what you say and you don't say. That's a big thing. It doesn't seem like a big thing, but it's kind of a big thing. And, some of the other stuff I talked about, the hands-on kind of things that we want to get into. Yes, there you go. There's my final slide. So my key thing is, like, I can quote unquote count you as being involved as soon as you apply. I'm required. Speaking of ARL not telling us to do, they told me, so you have to apply. You're supposed to use a stupid Word doc form. I don't have that. I set up like a form on the website so you can just submit. But basically the whole point is that so I can capture what everybody's current capabilities are, and then officially like count you as a member. And then I can tell them that we've quadrupled our membership since like last month when we had 4 members. And then, very shortly from here, I want to do, kind of our first net training and start getting people ramped up on that. So I went really fast, but any questions? Any more questions?
Slow down. How much caffeine did you have?
So,
Liz, thank you so much. That's just really, really helpful.
I think that's the most interesting explanation of ARES or races that I've heard. That's the only one that made me think that I might be interested in it at all.
it was the graphic at
I'm
the
thinking
end.
about it
That's
too.
what sold it. So, yeah. So I definitely, as many of you as want to, obviously, if that's not your thing, you don't want to, I understand, but, it would be great to have a good core of folks who want to participate, and that'll help us, do better in the future, I guess. All right.
And the place to reach that application page is the aresdc.org membership apply location.
Yep. If you just go to aresdc.org, that's the site I set up last year. And then under the membership section, you can just click apply or just email me direct if you have questions or you don't want to use that. You want to fill out the Word doc, you can knock yourself out. No matter what, love for people to participate. Love follow-up questions if you got them. So.
Liz, maybe to connect the ARES and the engagement groups, we could think about like what your kind of minimum list of qualifications that somebody showing up for ARES would
minimum
need.
qualifications.
We could make that part of
Ham
the
radio
engagement group.
license. That's it. Ham radio
That's
license.
it, just a license. Okay, well,
Yep.
yeah, hopefully everybody will have that.
Yeah, I didn't get into the nitty gritty. If we were going to be roped in as RACES or support for some other organization, they'll probably have more requirements. And I kind of laid out on the website, we'll probably have multiple levels that line up somewhat with the training that I put on there. And that's probably what will be the minimum viable training for people to eventually get access to some of the served agencies when we get there. In the meantime, anybody with a license. So.
Terrific.
Got it.
Liz, thank you so much for racing through that. No pun intended. It's 9:08. I know we've gone long this time around. I think it was worth it for all the sharing of information that we had, and we will do our best to keep these a little shorter in the future. That said, I think it was a great meeting.
Yeah, it was worth the extra
Thank
time.
you all around. So I hope that everybody who wants to get involved knows who to reach out to do that and how to do that. And we will meet again in a month, and hopefully each of these work streams will have made some progress, and we'll all be a little farther ahead.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, John, for your leadership.
Thank you for everything. Wow, excellent.
Thank you, everybody.
That was a good meeting. I'm sorry I was 15 minutes late.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all. See you soon.